So, I get on about this constantly, that if you really look at the problems the UK is facing, the whole European Union thing becoming a superstate is not an issue. We have veto power. Well, we had veto power in the European Union when we were a member of it. That hasn't changed. We are not part of the Euro, we are not part of the Schengen. No one could force us to adopt any of those things, despite what Brexiteers say. However, when you look again at the UK, we have so many problems. Austerity, destroying public services, the NHS, council services, you know, you name it. Yeah, and yet this has been the problem for almost a decade, and yet anyone in the UK who talks about political problems or is a political, commentator on YouTube, I'm not in the least. I just do things that find me interesting. I'm by no means a political commentator. All these people who talk about this stuff, they never talk about the problems of, austerity and the things it has caused. They never talk of things about problems such as, the problems that universal credit has caused in areas. And it's funny that all these guys, for example, think that somehow the UK has this massive freedom of speech problem when it really, really doesn't. And yet they do not talk a single thing that are affecting real people, real communities in the UK, such as austerity. And this article in Independent sums up just what a problem austerity has been. And it's true what I've said since the very beginning of this whole thing. The UK is facing real problems, and Brexit doesn't help these problems, it just magnifies them and makes them worse. So I'll leave a link to the article down below, but it's called "Austerity Will Continue to Harm Britain for Years to Come, and Brexit Won't Help Matters." Even if the UK refused to pay the divorce bill to the EU, as well as ceasing all subversions to the EU budgets and agencies, the economic shock to the UK will be of historic and self-inflicted proportions. So, communities across Britain have endured a decade of almost unyielding austerity. They have grown used to poorer public services, though not complacent or satisfied about the result. They have, for example, seen cuts in community policing that have compromised efforts to combat burglary and other significant crimes, even allowing for the unusual considerations of special pleading and the latest warnings from the Police Federation about offences going not only unpunished but uninvestigated ring true, because we have seen such a deterioration in public safety in recent years. No one talks about this. I point it out, but on Trigonometry, a channel where Sargo got interviewed, and he talks about the problem of Muslim gangs. If you want to talk, as I said in another video about this, if you want to have this problem about this, then austerity is the root cause of the gang problem in the UK. But Sargon doesn't even acknowledge that, and for some reason links it to immigration. So, the statistics substantiate the claims. Murder and violent crime rates are up. There is much more drink driving. The wave of cyber attacks on bank accounts threatens ruin for many families. Scandals over disclosure of material in criminal cases such as rape highlight how the digital age and the vast volume of text and email messages consume detectives' finite time. The scourge of gangs, moped muggings, and drug dealers, country lines, and as in Moss Side, overnight shootings are all challenges that are stretching constabularies nationally. They are hardly alone. The financial collapse of Northamptonshire County Council is likely to be the first of many, and we talked about this last year. Yeah, last year I believe. We did a story about how there were 10 councils basically facing collapse and bankruptcy because of the amount of money the government has basically been taking away from these councils. And one of the things that these councils had been relying on over this course of austerity, in fact many councils had been, but they've been relying on the Social European Economic Fund, which gave councils the money to run projects which the government had basically taken away from them. Now, if you look at the EU as a whole, if you look at like the 10 poorest regions, 7 of those regions are in the UK. Out of all the European Union, 7 of those regions are in the UK. That should say something to you guys, that there is a problem, and the European Union recognised that was a problem and put huge amounts of money into trying solving this problem. What did the government do? The government has done nothing over, this government has done nothing to solve or try and alleviate these problems. So, the NHS, it continues on with, supposedly protected from austerity, has found its annual winter crisis become normalised. The armed forces and security services, too, are being asked to do more with less, as are schools and social services. Universal credit, meanwhile, looks capable of devastating both public spending targets and the welfare of the poorest in society. So botched has it been. And, you want to look at a problem in this country, look at universal credit and the massive, massive amount of problems that this has caused. And not only that, but problems that were highlighted before it was even rolled out or even trialled in areas. But the government decided, oh no, it's going to roll it out, it'll be fine. This is one of the biggest problems we see in UK politics, that they are all about short-term, quick problem-solving solutions, not long-term solutions that might involve a lot of investment, a lot of time, and a lot of waiting. It's always about, particularly this government, always about the short-term solution. Where are we continuing? Yeah, certainly there will be little money available to rescue rail commuters from their misery, because, as we've also heard, this is something I'm really passionate about. I take trains a lot. I live in a rather commutable area. I can get to Sheffield City Centre, Leeds City Centre, Wakefield. I can pretty much get to any major city from where I am, right in the city centre, by train. It's really convenient, has been for years. However, it is ludicrously expensive. Not only that, they've just announced a 3.5% rise in 2019 to rail prices. That's going to cost even more money. And I've banged on about this before in other videos. It costs, from Glasgow to Edinburgh, for a season ticket, the same amount it would cost for a rail pass to travel all over Germany by rail for an entire year. How come other governments around the world can so successfully keep the prices at a good level effectively, but ours can't? And that's because privatization has failed. And this is one of the things that anyone who goes, oh, privatization is a good thing, this is what we should be doing, less government, as Sargon has started dropping that bomb recently, a couple of his videos. How has privatization helped the rail network run better? Certainly in this country it hasn't. It's failed. And you're seeing now parts of privatization of the NHS. Are we going to be talking about in maybe like 10, 20 years' time about the fact that there's this mass failure of privatization in the NHS? Probably. So, it continues. So the tragedy is that relief was in sight as the economic picked up, employment reached new record heights, and tax rises yielded results for the exchequer. Public finances were recently moved towards a position where the nation was borrowing to invest rather than spend on current activities. Britain's credit rating was no longer in imminent jeopardy, and the sacrifices looked to perhaps to be worth it. Yet, just as public finances started to look sustainable, Brexit threatened more disruption and, in due course, further cuts in spending and services, and nevertheless increases in taxation and borrowing. It is a chilling prospect about which one only the very wealthy can feel comfortable. The Chancellor, Philip Hammond, has done what he can to prepare for the worst, but with so many others, he has underestimated how chaotic a hard Brexit next spring would be, and as it is a 60% probability, according to his colleague Liam Fox. The UK economy has already lost 30 billion of investment because of Brexit uncertainties. This is doubly damaging because it reduces future productivity and capacity of the economy, depressing productivity and, in due course, wages and output. The truth is that Mr. Hammond faces the worst outlook for the public finances in decade. Indeed, so bad is it in some respects that even throwing money at the problem will not work. If and when EU nationals leave after Brexit, public services will simply be unable to recruit the skilled, or for that matter, unskilled staff necessary at whatever wage rates are offered. The outlook then is grim, and far from the breezy optimism of the Brexiteers in the 2016 referendum. Even if the UK refused to pay the divorce bill to the EU, as well as ceasing all subsidies to the EU budgets and agencies, the economic shock to the UK would be historic and self-inflicted proportions. The NHS would be lucky to see the 350 million a week promised, given the hammering tax renewals will soon suffer. Individual households, as a recent ONS study detailed with terrifying accuracy, have no room for manoeuvre in their budgets either. Companies, for their part, feel they cannot risk investing. The government cannot risk investing. The government's own finances will thus then come under even greater pressure, and the nation still runs a trade deficit, one that will likely widen when we lose key EU markets. The abandonment of key public service position is already a reality in local authorities. What will follow? A means-tested NHS, fees for sixth formers, lower caps on housing benefits. These are all realities that we are going to face because of Brexit. And like I've said at the very beginning of this video, Brexit doesn't solve any of these problems, it just exacerbates them and makes them even worse. Some dismiss these notions as Project Fear, though tough choices will come in the 2020s. If we are to face the situation and the potential for civil disorder, which again, if you look at county councils a couple of weeks ago when they said how they were preparing, a lot of these councils have said, we are looking at the potential to have to prepare for civil disorder because people are going to be pissed because we can't fund a lot of these social things anymore that we used to be able to fund. You know, it's just unbelievable, and yet that's just dismissed as wiped away as, oh, it's just Project Fear. These are coming from even conservative councils, controlled councils, that are saying, yeah, we have to prepare for the possibility of some social upheaval. So, yeah, enjoy that, 2020, rioting in the streets. Thanks, Brexiteers. So if we are to save face in this situation and the potential for civil disorder, does it not make sense to give the people the most effective a final say on averting it? Some will feel the cost is still worth it for regaining our sovereignty and wouldn't give up their own job to leave the EU. Others will not. Either way, they deserve a chance to have a say about their future. And that's where we are at this moment in time. I completely agree. This is where we are currently as a country. We are in dire straits, and unfortunately, one of the things that we have to recognise is we are not governed well, and certainly this government, this Tory government, certainly isn't going to govern well either. And I hope Labour does a better job. And we're coming up to conference season, beginning next month, I think it is. Maybe in a couple of months' time, a couple of weeks' time, maybe. Momentum have they've passed the petition rate, so they're now going to have forced the party to retake a stance on Brexit. All the trade unions that back Labour have already said, we don't want Brexit to happen, it's going to be a disaster for us. All their members have voted and said, yeah, we agree, enforce that stance. You've got pretty much every single business out there saying Brexit is going to be bad for us. I think that Brexit is going to make the 2008 crash look like child's play. And that's saying something. And remember, we are still, at the moment, suffering the effects of the 2008 crash. As are some areas in this country still suffering from the deindustrialization of the North. These areas have been suffering for decades, and nothing has been done to help to try to really alleviate the problems of these people are facing. And now people say, oh, you don't talk about the real problems. Well, congratulations. I've been talking about these problems for quite some time, yet whenever I talk about, we should need to stop Brexit, this is the problems that we also need to talk about, because Brexit doesn't solve these problems, it makes them worse. But there you go. Yeah. Yeah, so enjoy, guys, because as usual, we told you so. We told you this was going to happen. We told you it wasn't going to end well. We told you there was no economic upsides to Brexit. And every day there is a new study, new research that proves us right. But, whatever, guys, sovereignty, we already had it. You were just lied to that we didn't. The only thing you didn't have sovereignty over was literally regulations in some areas of business and industry. And yet, you guys didn't even give a dot about these regulations, because I know so. I've talked to Brexiteers through the past. They don't even care about these regulations in principle. In fact, when you talk to some of them, they agree that these regulations should be in place. They just don't like that the EU's put them in place. So when UKIP say, we want to have a bonfire of regulations, what regulations do you want to get rid of? Because I know workers' rights is certainly top of that bonfire. In fact, that is the Guy Fawkes of that bonfire. So, yeah, enjoy that, guys. Enjoy, because, there's only so many times you can try and talk to people before you realise you've got to call them an idiot. And there will be some people that will get annoyed at me for calling these people idiots. Or because they say, oh, no, you've got to try and engage with them properly. Well, I'm sorry, but I've tried for the past 2 years to try and engage people and try and inform people about the problems of Brexit, and they won't admit reality. So what else do you call someone at that point? I'd really like to know.